I would like to pay homage to the warriors, the fighters, the elders and the ancestors of the lands across the Sydney Basin, the ones we recognise and the ones we've never heard of. I wish to acknowledge and honour the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians on the land on which we are meeting on today. I pay my deepest respect to the Aboriginal people who were forcibly removed, displaced and resettled in Sydney during colonisation and post-settlement. I also pay my respects to those still living on the lands of Sydney and the surrounding areas. I pay my respects to those who walked, protected, cared and nurtured this land since time immemorial, which has allowed you and I to be able to meet here today. I want to acknowledge all elders who are no longer with us and those we are still so lucky to have. I want to honour all Aboriginal people who stand with me in this room today and acknowledging our continuing connection to land and culture, as we are the most resilient people in the world. We are the oldest continuing culture in the world. As the cultural authority of the lands in which we meet on today, I also want to acknowledge the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. I want to also extend my respect to the Djab Wurrung people in Melbourne that are currently fighting for the preservation and protection of 800-year-old birthing trees at risk of destruction for a new highway. Also to the Gomeroi people who are currently fighting against the Santos gas project in Narrabri, which will result in devastation of Gomeroi lands, waters and people. There have been a number of Aboriginal people and families who have been instrumental in ensuring Aboriginal people have rights and continue to have rights in this country. They fought and continue to fight for land rights, justice, housing, employment and health services across Sydney and Australia for the betterment of all Aboriginal people, irrespective of what state or town they lived in. My family members who fought on the front line are my mum Shell, my great-aunt, my nin Frances Haroa, my mother, Ross Sadoka, my uncle Paul Coe, Auntie Jenny Munro, Auntie Isabel Coe and Auntie Ann Weldon. This is only a glimpse of my elders, family members and caretakers who have fought for my rights and opportunities as a black woman today. I come from a long line of fighters who I'm proud to acknowledge, who showed, led and taught us, the younger generation, to be proud and protective people and continue to fight for our rights to teach the next generation. My name is Renee Thompson and I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman. My family and I stem from Arambi Mission, Cowra and the surrounding areas. I was born and raised in Mount Druitt and the surrounding suburbs of Western Sydney. I am the proud Deputy Chairperson of Durban Local Aboriginal Land Council and the Senior Project Partnerships Officer at Kimberwali, which is an initiative to create a culturally safe, innovative place that supports young Aboriginal people transition from school onto further education, tertiary studies, career development and employment. As a member of the Dialogue's Gen West initiative, I recognise the other 15 young people who continue to honour and showcase Greater Western Sydney's rich tapestry of culture and history whilst advocating for the region's social and cultural capital. Gen West provides a diverse perspective to the work committed by the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue by contributing to discussion and advocating on the future infrastructure, both physical and social, of Western Sydney. Recently, I would encourage all of you, that a few members participated in a virtual NAIDOC yarn with Auntie Jenny Ebsworth, one of the most respected and highly regarded elders of Western Sydney and Western New South Wales Aboriginal communities. Early next year, we aim to build a content campaign to create greater awareness of Gen West and our position on issues impacting the next generation of our people and families of Western Sydney. As I stand before you today, I want to ensure you all understand the significance and the importance of acknowledging country. When we speak about acknowledging country, we must remember why we are partaking in one and what it means. Firstly, it is to acknowledge the land. We come from the land. Acknowledgement of country is an Aboriginal custom. It is to remember that Aboriginal people have been caretakers of the land for millennia. It also provides an opportunity to show a sign of respect, not just Aboriginal people, but more importantly, for non-Aboriginal people. To acknowledge country is to pay homage and respect to the first peoples of this land we all call home. It is to acknowledge Aboriginal people's continued sovereignty and connection to the land and waterways since time began. It is to always remember that our ancestors and our old people walked these lands and they continue to walk these lands. I encourage each of you to do your own research of the countries you live and work on and to acknowledge the traditional owners who enabled you to be here today. Now, given that today's question is how can Greater Western Sydney lead the national recovery, I want each and every single one of you to know that the investment you make now and in the future within Western Sydney has the ability to lift the economic position for the largest minority in the places we work, if it is done right. For Aboriginal communities, ethical and practical investment can create up to change for 4 generations. If we look at housing, for instance, housing is the foundation that will lift the economic prosperity of Aboriginal people in Western Sydney. Aboriginal people are still among the highest population of homeless people in our Western Sydney catchment. The ongoing issue is a direct reflection of the injustices Aboriginal people continue to face. Housing provides an environment for people to gather, cook, eat, sleep and learn. It provides shelter, stability and a safe place for our families. Everyone in this country deserves a stable, beautiful home, as shelter is a human right. My challenge for everyone here today is, how do we take the time to get it right so Aboriginal people are the net beneficiaries of this investment? How do we ensure that lifting the economic position of a group of people through the investment, we can make a result as a recovery stimulus? If we get this right, we will be one step closer to creating equity for the first people of this country. I want you to leave you all with one of my favourite quotes by Nancy Duarte, and it is, "The future isn't a place that we're going to, the future is a place that you get to create." We are the future, we have it in our hands, and it is up to us to shape and transform the future we want to create for those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today and those who are yet to join us. May all of our ancestors walk with you, guide you through your journey and allow us to be able to reflect on the journey we're on and how far we still have to go. We must never forget that beneath this concrete and beneath these buildings, this is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. That was wonderful and some important messages there for us all to consider throughout the day. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Leto. I'm the Executive Director of the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue, and welcome to Boomtown 2020. It's great to have so many familiar faces with us today and in the flesh for the first time in what seems quite a while. Today's event actually marks a special occasion for the dialogue. Not only do we get to do what we do best, which is bring together the city's best across a range of sectors to discuss the big issues in Western Sydney, but it's also our 5th consecutive Boomtown event, having launched this back in 2016. The reason I bring that up is, and before we kick off today's program, I think it's important to note that it's important to touch on some of that history, because in many ways a lot of the policies, the projects and the momentum that was established back then is still shaping the transport, infrastructure and property landscape in Western Sydney that we're going to be hearing about later. The draft district plans, for instance, which were launched by the Greater Sydney Commission late in 2016 and discussed by then Economic Commissioner Jeff Roberts at our first Boomtown Summit, who will actually be joining us later on stage today, introduced Sydney to a 3-city model, and combined with the Future Transport Strategy, also developed in 2016, and the State Infrastructure Strategy, has helped establish a long-term vision for the region, one where its future land use and its transport connections, as well as how things like our hospitals, our schools, our parks, how they're planned and considered, all tied together. Importantly, our first Boomtown event also looked at how, through value capture, we were going to pay for it all, an issue that's perhaps even more relevant to today's climate. It was somewhat of a watershed moment for planning in this city, especially for Western Sydney, which had long been talked about as the solution to Sydney's growth. It reaffirmed that this was where the city's future lied, that this was, as the then New South Wales Premier Mike Baird put it, the infrastructure capital of the world. And for the first time we had a coordinating authority sitting across government to ensure everyone was in sync, a vision which was supported and led by both transport and planning, and a group of political leaders who were intent on getting on with the job of making it happen. To a degree, that's what these past few years have been about. Back in 2016, we had the likes of Jeff and Lucy, Tim Reardon in his former role as Head of Infrastructure New South Wales, Kerry Mather, then boss of Sydney Airport. Yes, they were all sitting across different areas and different portfolios, and yes, they're all wearing new hats these days. But the one consistent message was, and I've checked the tapes, we need to get the planning right. Fast forward to today, and as you can see in our program, the message is slightly different. It's about delivery. It's a message that has taken on greater meaning given everything that's transpired in 2020. One of the positives that has emerged from the pandemic, in addition to the amazing responsiveness of government and our frontline servicemen and women, has been the commitment, particularly through our agencies, to cut through the bureaucracy and the administration to not just keep us safe, but to keep our economy in check. One of the lines that we've often heard is that this is going to be an infrastructure-led bounce back, and a quick look at the state budget and its record level of spending certainly suggests that. Pleasingly, a large chunk of those dollars is going to be spent in Western Sydney. Not only is this a region that is home to the largest pipeline of infrastructure projects in the region, but it's also set to host a wave of projects which, off the back of COVID-19, have now been fast-tracked for approval. While the new Metro line, light rail lines and the Western Sydney Airport might rightly claim most of the big headlines, these new initiatives, which may not be as well known, have the potential to deliver similarly impressive urban, environmental and social outcomes. I'm talking about things like the $18 million green hydrogen facility at Horsley Park, the first of its kind in Australia, and a major step forward for the renewable energy sector. I'm talking about the approved rezonings of Mount Druitt, Villawood and Fairfield town centres, the new high-rise buildings in Harris Park and the Hills, new schools in Marsden Park, new plans for a high-tech industrial precinct off Memory Road in the Aerotropolis. These are just a few of the more than 100 capital projects that have been given the tick as part of the government's fast-track assessment program introduced nearly 6 months ago. What's more interesting is that of these projects, nearly half of them will be based in Western Sydney and worth more than $12 billion and generating more than 22,000 jobs. As you'll no doubt hear today, there's an abundance of work that has or is about to kick off in Western Sydney. And what this past year has taught us is that with the right building blocks in place, even when things get a little bit crazy, we can still find a way to get things done. One of the points that our chairman, Christopher Brown, will be making a little bit later today, and something that the dialogue is keen to see continue, is that spending. That if the nation wants to literally dig itself out of a recession, then Western Sydney is the right place to start. There are a number of projects that we believe can play a big role in stimulating economic activity, delivering city-shaping impact, all while keeping people employed. Christopher will talk through some of those a little bit later. In many ways, the challenges we've faced this year, the bushfires, the floods, the droughts, the pandemic, all of these crises have in a way also presented opportunities for Western Sydney. We're now starting to see stronger awareness, not just stronger awareness, but clear actions designed to improve livability and urban design in the region, something that we hope remains a top priority for government and the private sector. COVID-19 has seen us look inwards towards the opportunities for industry growth, especially when it comes to advanced manufacturing. What better place to start than in Western Sydney, the one-time manufacturing capital of the nation? We are and always have been a region of makers. Traditional manufacturing hubs in places like Bankstown, Smithfield, Lidcombe, combined with the emergence of new tech industrial sites within the Aerotropolis, there is a real opportunity for the region to combine the new with the old, to leverage the research and education links delivered by our universities and TAFE, in a sense, to go back to the future, to deliver the next generation of jobs. This is Western Sydney's time to shine. Before I wrap things up today and get today's show started, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. Firstly, all this investment, both budgeted, projected and hopefully incoming, isn't as much as a nice to have as it is a necessity. Faced with unemployment levels, particularly youth unemployment, there's already as high as 25% in some places. The full impact of COVID-19 from an economic standpoint could be quite devastating for a Western Sydney economy that has relied heavily on construction and services economies and has been predicated on steady, continued population growth. The big concern is that we're still to feel the full commercial force of this pandemic, and history has shown us that our region doesn't fare well during economic downturns. Large chunks of southwest Sydney had 30% of its workforce unemployed or underemployed during the 90s recession, and these communities will again be at risk as we enter 2021. Continued infrastructure investment is not the only factor, but it will be critical in hopefully mitigating against rising unemployment. But just as important is also ensuring that the appropriate support, the services and the opportunities are out there for young people, our migrant and Indigenous communities, and those without the same level of access to housing, education or even internet, things that many of us take for granted. And finally, I'd like to close by just saying thanks. Thanks for all of you here today for embracing the opportunity to be out of hibernation, away from the Zoom or the Teams, and in an environment where we don't have to hit the mute button to shut out the background noise. Thanks to not just our sponsors, the New South Wales Government and our other partners for today and ongoing with the dialogue, but for your messages of reassurance and confidence throughout this year. It's been a trying one, no question, but the support we've received, the solidarity and goodwill that's come to the fore, and the friendships that have evolved along the way have certainly helped 2020 more manageable. It has been a year of firsts in more ways than one for the dialogue, and while we've embraced and had plenty of success with technologies in the world of social distancing, we certainly look forward to seeing more of you in 2021.